Friendship that'll last forever. Oh, no lunchbox friends no more. No lunchbox friends. Come to my house. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to Stardew. It's been a big day. If you'll check the description, actually, I was on a stream that wasn't this one. If you check the description. And it was a 12-hour stream to fundraise for a friend's, top surgery. Fucking lucky bastard. How dare he? I'm offended. How dare he get his top surgery? How dare he find a way to be content with his body? Criminal. And by criminal, I of course mean, great. That's very good. Anyway. Oh yeah, take all the eggs. No. Anyway. Links to that is in the description, down below. You can go give him some money. He is the husband of Oblivionful. You may know him. He's friend of me, Cetol. Oh, God. Today's been a day. But now it's time to chill. It's time to chillax. It's time to relax. Day's over now. All that's left is me and Stardew Valley. Nothing else. Well, Babe's here, of course. Can't recycle this ruby. What a pity. I can check the ruby in here. Staircase, wood club. Forest sword. I can't sell those either. Woo. Alright. Wednesday. Today's George's birthday, I do believe. I feel like it's George's birthday, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's already been George's birthday. Whose birthday is it? I mean, I'm whacking with a club. Oh, God. Yeah, it's not really work that tired me out. It was that, I had to do stuff after work, you know? Babe, you bring me food?
Yep.
Oh, a food. That's some crunchy food. Was there no vegetables?
No, that's why I'm going shopping tomorrow, remember?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
We have no vegetables.
And you dropped your fork.
Is that just regular steak? Oh, it's Linus's birthday. Yeah, I don't need a golden leek until George's next birthday, really. Said, hey girl, will you sit with me? Table in the back, cafeteria seat. We could be friends if you wanna be, but only till the clock hits 3. After lunch we can walk to class. Talk about the boys we wanna smash. Talk about ways to get a little more cash. After that I'll... Hello! Oh my god, there's someone here listening to me singing. Wait, why are we listening to me sing? I mean, we could be getting ready for our English assignment.
He began pouring out our secrets right and left, in total disregard for my safety, if not for his own, omitting nothing, knothole, pants, and all. Mr. Nathan put cement in that tree, Atticus, and he did it to stop us finding things. He's crazy, I reckon, like they say, but Atticus, I swear to God, he ain't ever harmed us. He ain't ever hurt us. He could have cut my throat from ear to ear that night, but he tried to mend my pants instead. He ain't ever hurt us, Atticus. Atticus said, whoa, son, so gently that I was greatly heartened. It was obvious that he had not followed a word Jem said, for all Atticus said was, "You're right. We'd better keep this and the blanket to ourselves. Someday, maybe, Scout can thank him for covering her up." "Thank who?" I asked. "Boo Radley. You were so busy looking at the fire, you didn't know it when he put the blanket around you." My stomach turned to water, and I nearly threw up when Jem held out the blanket and crept toward me. He sneaked out of the house, turned round, sneaked up, and went like this. Atticus said dryly, "Do not let this inspire you to further glory, Jeremy." Jem scowled. "I ain't gonna do anything to him." But I watched the spark of fresh adventure leave his eyes. "Just think, Scout," he said. "If you had just turned around, you'd have seen him." Calpurnia woke us at noon. Atticus had said we need not go to school that day. We'd learn nothing after no sleep. Calpurnia said for us to try and clean up the front yard. Miss Morty's sun hat was suspended in a thin layer of ice, like a fly in amber, and we had to dig under the dirt for her hedge clippers. We found her in her backyard, gazing at her frozen, charred azaleas.
Poor azaleas.
"We're bringing back your things, Miss Morty," said Jem. "We're awful sorry." Miss Morty looked around, and the shadow of her old grin crossed her face. "Always wanted a smaller house, Jem Finch. Gives me more yard. Just think, I'll have more room for my azaleas now." "You ain't grieving, Miss Morty?" I asked, surprised. Atticus said her house was nearly all she had. "Grieving, child? Why, I hated that old cow barn. Thought of setting fire to it 100 times myself, except they'd lock me up. But don't you worry about me, Jean Louise Finch. There are ways of doing things you don't know about. Why, I'll build me a little house, and take me a couple of roomers, and, gracious, I'll have the finest yard in Alabama. Those Bellingraths'll look plain puny when I get started." Jem and I looked at each other. "How'd it catch, Miss Morty?" he asked. "I don't know, Jem. Probably the flue in the kitchen. I kept a fire in there last night for my potted plants. Hear you had some unexpected company last night, Miss Jean Louise." "How'd you know?" "Atticus told me on his way to town this morning. Tell you the truth, I'd like to have been with you, and I'd have had sense enough to turn around, too." Miss Morty puzzled me. With most of her possessions gone, and her beloved yard a shambles, she still took a lively and cordial interest in Jem's and my affairs. She must have seen my perplexity. She said, "Only thing I worried about last night was all the danger and commotion it caused. This whole neighborhood could have gone up. Mr. Avery'll be in bed for a week. He's right stove up. He's too old to do things like that, and I told him so. Soon as I can get my hands clean, and when Stephanie Crawford's not looking, I'll make him a lane cake. That Stephanie's been after my recipe for 30 years, and if she thinks I'll give it to her just because I'm staying with her, she's got another think coming." I reflected that if Miss Morty broke down and gave it to her, Miss Stephanie couldn't follow it anyway. Miss Morty had once let me see it. Among other things, the recipe called for 1 large cup of sugar. It was a still day. The air was so cold and clear we heard the courthouse clock clank, rattle, and strain before it struck the hour. Miss Morty's nose was a color I had never seen before, and I inquired about it. "I've been out here since 6 o'clock," she said. "Should be frozen by now." She held up her hands. A network of tiny lines crisscrossed her palms, brown with dirt and dried blood. "You've ruined 'em," said Jem. "Why don't you get a colored man?" There was no note of sacrifice in his voice when he added, "Or scouting me. We can help you." Miss Morty said, "Thank you, sir, but you've got a job of your own over there." She pointed to our yard. You mean the morphodite? I asked. Shoot, we can rake him up in a jiffy. Miss Morty stared down at me, her lips moving silently. Suddenly, she put her hands to her head and whooped. When we left her, she was still chuckling. Jem said he didn't know what was the matter with her. That was just Miss Morty. Chapter 9. You can just take that back, boy. This order, given by me to Cecil Jacobs, was the beginning of a rather thin time for Jem and me. My fists were clenched and I was ready to let fly. Atticus had promised me he would wear me out if he ever heard of me fighting anymore. I was far too old and too big for such childish things, and the sooner I learned to hold in, the better off everybody would be. I soon forgot.
Kick him.
Cecil Jacobs made me forget. He had announced in the schoolyard the day before that Scout Finch's daddy defended niggers. I denied it, but told Jem. What do you mean saying that? I asked. Nothing, Jem said. Ask Atticus. He'll tell you. Do you defend niggers, Atticus? I asked him that evening. Of course I do. Don't say nigger, Scout. That's common. It's what everybody at school says. From now on, it'll be everybody less one. Well, if you don't want me to grow up talking that way, why do you send me to school? My father looked at me mildly, amusement in his eyes. Despite our compromise, my campaign to avoid school had continued in one form or another since my first day's dose of it. The beginning of last September had brought on sinking spells, dizziness, and mild gastric complaints. I went so far as to pay a nickel for the privilege of rubbing my head against the head of Miss Rachel's cook's son, who was afflicted with a tremendous ringworm. It didn't take. But I was worrying another bone. Do all lawyers defend Negroes, Atticus? Of course they do, Scout. Then why did Cecil say you defended niggers? He made it sound like you were running a still. Atticus sighed. I'm simply defending a Negro. His name's Tom Robinson. He lives in that little settlement beyond the town dump. He's a member of Calpurnia's church, and Cal knows his family well. She says they're clean living folks. Scout,
Oh, that's it!
you aren't
That's
old
the
enough
thing!
to understand some things yet. But there's been some high talk around town to the effect that I shouldn't do much about defending this man. It's a peculiar case. It won't come to trial until summer session. John Taylor was kind enough to give us a postponement. If you shouldn't be defending him, then why are you doing it? For a number of reasons, said Atticus. The main one is, if I didn't, I couldn't hold up my head in town. I couldn't represent this county in the legislature. I couldn't even tell you or Jem not to do something again.
Oh, damn it.
You mean, if you didn't defend that man, Jem and me wouldn't have to mind you anymore? That's about right. Why? Because I could never ask you to mind me again. Scout, simply by the nature of the work, every lawyer gets at least one case in his lifetime that affects him personally. This one's mine, I guess. You might hear some ugly talk about it at school, but do one thing for me, if you will. You just hold your head high and keep those fists down. No matter what anybody says to you, don't you let 'em get your goat. Try fighting with your head for a change. It's a good one, even if it does resist learning. Atticus, are we going to win it? No, honey. Then why? Simply because we were licked 100 years before we started is no reason for us not to try to win, Atticus said. You sound like Cousin Ike Finch, I said. Cousin Ike Finch was Macomb County's sole surviving Confederate veteran. He wore a General Hood-type beard, of which he was inordinately vain. At least once a year, Atticus, Jem, and I called on him, and I would have to kiss him. It was horrible. Jem and I would listen respectfully to Atticus and Cousin Ike rehash the war. "Tell you, Atticus," Cousin Ike would say, "the Missouri Compromise was what licked us. But if I had to go through it again, I'd walk every step of the way there and every step back, just like I did before. And furthermore, we'd whip 'em this time." Now, in 1864, when Stonewall Jackson came around I beg your pardon, young folks. Old Blue Light was in heaven then. God rest his saintly brow. "Come here, Scout," said Atticus. I crawled into his lap and tucked my head under his chin. He put his arms around me and rocked me gently. "It's different this time," he said. "This time we aren't fighting the Yankees. We're fighting our friends. But remember this, no matter how bitter things get, they're still our friends, and this is still our home." With this in mind, I faced Cecil Jacobs in the schoolyard next day. "You gonna take that back, boy?" "You gotta make me first," he yelled. "My folks said your daddy was a disgrace, and that nigger ought to hang from the water tank." I drew a bead on him, remembered what Atticus had said, then dropped my fists and walked away. "Scout's a coward," ringing in my ears. It was the first time I ever walked away from a fight. Somehow, if I fought Cecil, I would let Atticus down. Atticus so rarely asked Jem and me to do something for him, I could take being called a coward for him. I felt extremely noble for having remembered, and remained noble for 3 weeks. Then Christmas came, and disaster struck. Jem and I viewed Christmas with mixed feelings. The good side was the tree and Uncle Jack Finch. Every Christmas Eve day we met Uncle Jack at Macomb Junction, and he would spend a week with us. A flip of the coin revealed the uncompromising lineaments of Aunt Alexandra and Francis. I suppose I should include Uncle Jimmy, Aunt Alexandra's husband, but as he never spoke a word to me in my life except to say, "Get off the fence," once, I never saw any reason to take notice of him. Neither did Aunt Alexandra. Long ago, in a burst of friendliness, Auntie and Uncle Jimmy produced a son named Henry, who left home as soon as was humanly possible, married, and produced Francis. Henry and his wife deposited Francis at his grandparents' every Christmas, then pursued their own pleasures. No amount of sighing could induce Atticus to let us spend Christmas Day at home. We went to Finch's Landing every Christmas in my memory. The fact that Auntie was a good cook was some compensation for being forced to spend a religious holiday with Francis Hancock. He was a year older than I, and I avoided him on principle. He enjoyed everything I disapproved of, and disliked my ingenuous diversions. Aunt Alexandra was Atticus's sister, but when Jem told me about changelings and siblings, I decided that she had been swapped at birth, that my grandparents had perhaps received a Crawford instead of a Finch. Had I ever harbored the mystical notions about mountains that seem to obsess lawyers and judges, Aunt Alexandra would have been analogous to Mount Everest. Throughout my early life, she was cold and there. When Uncle Jack jumped down from the train Christmas Eve day, we had to wait for the porter to hand him 2 long packages. Jem and I always thought it funny when Uncle Jack pecked Atticus on the cheek. They were the only 2 men we ever saw kiss each other. Uncle Jack shook hands with Jem and swung me high, but not high enough. Uncle Jack was a head shorter than Atticus. The baby of the family, he was younger than Aunt Alexandra. He and Auntie looked alike, but Uncle Jack made better use of his face. We were never wary of his sharp nose and chin. He was one of the few men of science who never terrified me, probably because he never behaved like a doctor. whenever he performed a minor service for Jem and me, as removing a splinter from a foot. He would tell us exactly what he was going to do, give us an estimation of how much it would hurt, and explain the use of any tongs he employed. One Christmas, I lurked in corners, nursing a twisted splinter in my foot, permitting no one to come near me. When Uncle Jack caught me, he kept me laughing about a preacher who hated going to church so much that every day he stood at his gate in his dressing gown, smoking a hookah, and delivering 5-minute sermons to any passers-by who desired spiritual comfort. I interrupted to make Uncle Jack let me know when he would pull it out, but he held up a bloody splinter and a pair of tweezers and said he yanked it while I was laughing. That was what was known as relativity. "What's in those packages?" I asked him, pointing to the long, thin parcels the porter had given him. "None of your business," he said. Jem said, "How's Rose Aylmer?" Rose Aylmer was Uncle Jack's cat. She was a beautiful yellow female Uncle Jack said was one of the few women he could stand permanently. He reached into his coat pocket and brought out some snapshots. We admired them. "She's getting fat," I said. "I should think so. She eats all the leftover fingers and ears from the hospital." "Aw, that's a damn story," I said. "I beg your pardon?" Atticus said, "Don't pay any attention to her, Jack. She's trying you out. Cal says she's been cussing fluently for a week now." Uncle Jack raised his eyebrows and said nothing. I was proceeding on the dim theory, aside from the innate attractiveness of such words, that if Atticus discovered I had picked them up at school, he wouldn't make me go. But at supper that evening, when I asked him to pass the damn ham, please, Uncle Jack pointed at me. "See me afterwards, young lady," he said. When supper was over, Uncle Jack went to the living room and sat down. He slapped his thighs for me to come sit on his lap. I liked to smell him. He was like a bottle of alcohol and something pleasantly sweet. He pushed back my bangs and looked at me. "You're more like Atticus than your mother," he said. "You're also growing out of your pants a little. I reckon they fit all right. You like words like damn and hell now, don't you?" I said I reckoned so. "Well, I don't," said Uncle Jack. "Not unless there's extreme provocation connected with them. I'll be here a week, and I don't want to hear any words like that while I'm here. Scout, you'll get in trouble if you go around saying things like that. You want to grow up to be a lady, don't you?" I said not particularly. "Of course you do. Now let's get to the tree." We decorated the tree until bedtime, and that night I dreamed of the 2 long packages for Jem and me. Next morning, Jem and I dived for them. They were from Atticus, who had written Uncle Jack to get them for us, and they were what we had asked for. "Don't point them in the house," said Atticus, when Jem aimed at a picture on the wall. "You'll have to teach him to shoot," said Uncle Jack. "That's your job," said Atticus. I merely bowed to the inevitable. It took Atticus's courtroom voice to drag us away from the tree. He declined to let us take our air rifles to the landing. I had already begun to think of shooting Francis, and said if we made one false move, he'd take them away from us for good. Finch's Landing consisted of 366 steps down a high bluff and ending in a jetty. Farther downstream, beyond the bluff, were traces of an old cotton landing where Finch Negroes had loaded bales and produce, unloaded blocks of ice, flour and sugar, farm equipment, and feminine apparel. A 2-rut road ran from the riverside and vanished among dark trees. At the end of the road was a 2-storied white house with porches circling it upstairs and downstairs. In his old age, our ancestor, Simon Finch, had built it to please his nagging wife. But with the porches, all resemblance to ordinary houses of its era ended. The internal arrangements of the Finch house were indicative of Simon's guilelessness, and the absolute trust with which he regarded his offspring. There were 6 bedrooms upstairs, 4 for the 8 female children, 1 for Welcome Finch, the sole son, and 1 for visiting relatives. Simple enough. But the daughters' rooms could be reached only by one staircase. Welcome's room and the guest room only by another. The daughters' staircase was in the ground floor bedroom of their parents, so Simon always knew the hours of his daughter's nocturnal comings and goings. There was a kitchen separate from the rest of the house, tacked onto it by a wooden catwalk. In the backyard was a rusty bell on a pole, used to summon field hands, or as a distress signal. A widow's walk was on the roof, but no widows walked there. From it, Simon oversaw his overseer, watched the riverboats, and gazed into the lives of surrounding landholders. There went with the house the usual legend about the Yankees. One Finch female, recently engaged, donned her complete trousseau to save it from raiders in the neighborhood. She became stuck in the door to the daughter's staircase, but was doused with water and finally pushed through. When we arrived at the landing, Aunt Alexandra kissed Uncle Jack, Francis kissed Uncle Jack, Uncle Jimmy shook hands silently with Uncle Jack, Jem and I gave our presents to Francis, who gave us a present. Jem felt his age and gravitated to the adults, leaving me to entertain our cousin. Francis was 8 and slicked back his hair. "What'd you get for Christmas?" I asked politely. "Just what I asked for," he said. Francis had requested a pair of knee pants, a red leather book sack, 5 shirts, and an untied bow tie. "That's nice," I lied. "Jem and me got air rifles, and Jem got a chemistry set, a toy one, I reckon. No, a real one. He's going to make me some invisible ink, and I'm going to write to Dill in it." Francis asked what was the use of that. "Well, can't you just see his face when he gets a letter from me with nothing in it? It'll drive him nuts." Talking to Francis gave me the sensation of settling slowly to the bottom of the ocean. He was the most boring child I ever met. As he lived in Mobile, he could not inform on me to school authorities, but he managed to tell everything he knew to Aunt Alexandra, who in turn unburdened herself to Atticus, who either forgot it or gave me hell, whichever struck his fancy. But the only time I ever heard Atticus speak sharply to anyone was when I once heard him say, "Sister, I do the best I can with them." It had something to do with my going around in overalls.
This ends Disc 3. To Kill a Mockingbird, Disc 4.
yeah, slide in the disc, boys.
Aunt Alexandra was fanatical on the subject of my attire. I could not possibly hope to be a lady if I wore breeches. When I said I could do nothing in a dress, she said I wasn't supposed to be doing things that required pants. Aunt Alexandra's vision of my deportment involved playing with small stoves, tea sets, and wearing the add-a-pearl necklace she gave me when I was born. Furthermore, I should be a ray of sunshine in my father's lonely life. I suggested that one could be a ray of sunshine in pants just as well, but Auntie said that one had to behave like a sunbeam. That I was born good, but had grown progressively worse every year. She hurt my feelings and set my teeth permanently on edge. But when I asked Atticus about it, he said there were already enough sunbeams in the family, and to go on about my business. He didn't mind me much the way I was. At Christmas dinner, I sat at the little table in the dining room. Jem and Francis sat with the adults at the dining table. Auntie had continued to isolate me long after Jem and Francis graduated to the big table. I often wondered what she thought I'd do. Get up and throw something? I sometimes thought of asking her if she would let me sit at the big table with the rest of them just once. I would prove to her how civilized I could be. After all, I ate at home every day with no major mishaps. When I begged Atticus to use his influence, he said he had none. We were guests, and we sat where she told us to sit. He also said Aunt Alexandra didn't understand girls much. She had never had one. But her cooking made up for everything. 3 kinds of meat, summer vegetables from her pantry shelves, peach pickles, 2 kinds of cake, and ambrosia constituted a modest Christmas dinner. Afterwards, the adults made for the living room and sat around in a dazed condition. Jem lay on the floor, and I went to the backyard. "Put on your coat," said Atticus dreamily, so I didn't hear him. Francis sat beside me on the back steps. "That was the best yet," I said. "Grandma's a wonderful cook," said Francis. "She's going to teach me how." "Boys don't cook." I giggled at the thought of Jem in an apron. "Grandma says all men should learn to cook, that men ought to be careful with their wives and wait on 'em when they don't feel good," said my cousin. "I don't want Dill waiting on me," I said. "I'd rather wait on him." "Dill?" "Yeah. Don't say anything about it yet, but we're going to get married as soon as we're big enough. He asked me last summer." Francis hooted. "What's the matter with him?" I asked. "Ain't anything the matter with him." "You mean that little runt Grandma says stays with Miss Rachel every summer? That's exactly who I mean." "I know all about him," said Francis. "What about him?" "Grandma says he hasn't got a home. Has 2. He lives in Meridian. He just gets passed around from relative to relative, and Miss Rachel keeps him every summer." "Francis, that's not so." Francis grinned at me. "You're mighty dumb sometimes, Jean Louise. Guess you don't know any better, though." "What do you mean?" "If Uncle Atticus lets you run around with stray dogs, that's his own business, like Grandma says. So it ain't your fault." "I guess it ain't your fault if Uncle Atticus is a nigger lover besides. But I'm here to tell you, it certainly does mortify the rest of the family." "Francis, what the hell do you mean?" "Just what I said. Grandma says it's bad enough he lets you all run wild, but now he's turned out a nigger lover. We'll never be able to walk the streets of Macomb again. He's ruining the family, that's what he's doing." Francis rose and sprinted down the catwalk to the old kitchen. At a safe distance, he called, "He's nothing but a nigger lover." "He is not," I roared. "I don't know what you're talking about, but you better cut it out this red-hot minute." I leaped off the steps and ran down the catwalk. It was easy to collar Francis. I said, "Take it back, quick." Francis jerked loose and sped into the old kitchen. "Nigger lover!" he yelled. When stalking one's prey, it is best to take one's time. Say nothing, and as sure as eggs, he will become curious and emerge. Francis appeared at the kitchen door. "You still mad, Jean Louise?" he asked tentatively. "Nothing to speak of," I said. Francis came out on the catwalk. "You gonna take it back, Francis?" But I was too quick on the draw. Francis shot back into the kitchen, so I retired to the steps. I could wait patiently. I had sat there perhaps 5 minutes when I heard Aunt Alexandra speak. "Where's Francis?" "He's out yonder in the kitchen." "He knows he's not supposed to play in there." Francis came to the door and yelled, "Grandma, she's got me in here, and she won't let me out." "What is all this, Jean Louise?" I looked up at Aunt Alexandra. "I haven't got him in there, Auntie. I ain't holding him." "Yes, she is," shouted Francis. "She won't let me out." "Have you all been fussing?" "Jean Louise got mad at me, Grandma," called Francis. "Francis, come out of there. Jean Louise, if I hear another word out of you, I'll tell your father."
Okay. What's
Hi.
up, honey?
Nothing. I was checking on you. How's the stream going?
It's going. May I have more water,
That's good.
please?
Sure. Do you want cold
Tap water.
Okay.
Just tap water
Yep.
will do.
Son, please. Son was in the way.
He's very son.
He is. He is indeed.
Fucking poor Jean Louise has to deal with racist cousins.
Hi there.
Did I hear you say hell a while ago? No. I thought I did. I'd better not hear it again. Aunt Alexandra was a back porch listener. The moment she was out of sight, Francis came out head up and grinning. "Don't you fool with me," he said. He jumped into the yard and kept his distance, kicking tufts of grass, turning around occasionally to smile at me. Jem appeared on the porch, looked at us, and went away. Francis climbed the mimosa tree, came down, put his hands in his pockets, and strolled around the yard. "Ha!" he said. I asked him who he thought he was, Uncle Jack. Francis said he reckoned I got told for me to just sit there and leave him alone. "I ain't bothering you," I said. Francis looked at me carefully, concluded that I had been sufficiently subdued, and crooned softly, "Nigger lover." This time I split my knuckle to the bone on his front teeth. My left impaired, I sailed in with my right, but not for long. Uncle Jack pinned my arms to my sides and said, "Stand still." Aunt Alexandra ministered to Francis, wiping his tears away with her handkerchief, rubbing his hair, patting his cheek. Atticus, Jem, and Uncle Jimmy had come to the back porch when Francis started yelling. "Who started this?" said Uncle Jack. Francis and I pointed at each other. "Grandma," he bawled. "She called me a whore lady and jumped on me." "Is that true, Scout?" said Uncle Jack. "I reckon so." When Uncle Jack looked down at me, his features were like Aunt Alexandra's. "You know I told you you'd get in trouble if you use words like that. I told you, didn't I?" "Yes, sir, but—" "Well, you're in trouble now. Stay there." I was debating whether to stand there or run, and tarried in indecision a moment too long. I turned to flee, but Uncle Jack was quicker. I found myself suddenly looking at a tiny ant struggling with a breadcrumb in the grass. "I'll never speak to you again as long as I live. I hate you and despise you and hope you die tomorrow." A statement that seemed to encourage Uncle Jack more than anything. I ran to Atticus for comfort, but he said I had it coming, and it was high time we went home. I climbed into the back seat of the car without saying goodbye to anyone, and at home I ran to my room and slammed the door. Jem tried to say something nice, but I wouldn't let him. When I surveyed the damage, there were only 7 or 8 red marks, and I was reflecting upon relativity when someone knocked on the door. I asked who it was. Uncle Jack answered. "Go away!" Uncle Jack said if I talked like that, he'd lick me again, so I was quiet. When he entered the room, I retreated to a corner and turned my back on him. "Scout," he said, "do you still hate me?" "Go on, please, sir." "Why, I didn't think you'd hold it against me," he said. "I'm disappointed in you. You had that coming, and you know it." "Didn't either." "Honey, you can't go around calling people—" "You ain't fair," I said. "You ain't fair." Uncle Jack's eyebrows went up. "Not fair? How not?" "You're real nice, Uncle Jack, and I reckon I love you even after what you did. But you don't understand children much." Uncle Jack put his hands on his hips and looked down at me. "And why do I not understand children, Miss Jean Louise? Such conduct as yours required little understanding. It was obstreperous, disorderly, and abusive." "You gonna give me a chance to tell you? I don't mean to sass you. I'm just trying to tell you." Uncle Jack sat down on the bed. His eyebrows came together, and he peered up at me from under them. Proceed, he said. I took a deep breath. Well, in the first place, you never stopped to give me a chance to tell you my side of it. You just lit right into me. When Jem and I fuss, Atticus doesn't ever just listen to Jem's side of it. He hears mine, too. And in the second place, you told me never to use words like that except in extreme provocation. And Francis provoked me enough to knock his block off. Uncle Jack scratched his head. What was your side of it, Scout? Francis called Atticus something, and I wasn't about to take it off him. What did Francis call him? A nigger lover? I ain't very sure what it means, but the way Francis said it. Tell you one thing right now, Uncle Jack, I swear before God, if I'll sit there and let him say something about Atticus. He called Atticus that? Yes, sir, he did, and a lot more. Said Atticus would be the ruination of the family, and he let Jem and me run wild. From the look on Uncle Jack's face, I thought I was in for it again. When he said, "We'll see about this," I knew Francis was in for it. I've a good mind to go out there tonight. Please, sir, just let it go. Please. I've no intention of letting it go, he said. Alexandra should know about this. The idea of... Wait till I get my hands on that boy. Uncle Jack, please promise me something. Please, sir. Promise you won't tell Atticus about this. He asked me one time not to let anything I heard about him make me mad. And I'd rather have him think we were fighting about something else instead. Please promise. But I don't like Francis getting away with something like that. He didn't. You reckon you could tie up my hand? It's still bleeding some. Of course I will, baby. I know of no hand I would be more delighted to tie up. Will you come this way? Uncle Jack gallantly bowed me to the bathroom, while he cleaned and bandaged my knuckles.
Alright. Hold the book. I'm gonna put my rice away. I gotta get some dessert. I think I deserve it. Deserve it? Yeah. Okay, got a knife and fork. Starting to stockpile for my office again. It's a bad habit of mine. strange to see the kind of values that are on display in To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Because, like, yes, a man should probably wait on his partner when they're unwell. As in, if your partner is sick, you should probably take care of them. That's the thing you should do. Not like a sexist thing. Like, not like, oh, a man ought to take care of their woman because they're... No, just like, help your partner when they're unwell. They're your partner. It's not like, it's not deep, it's not complicated, you know. But it's also like, oh, Scout, she should be in the kitchen wearing a dress. Like, I don't know. It's set, I mean, this is set way back when the progressive word for, for people of color was colored people. You know? This is like... It's not like intentionally racist, it's just like the time... Well, I mean, I suppose part of it is intentionally racist, but like the time in which this was made was back when this kind of verbiage was you know, more less racist.
He entertained me with a tale about a funny, nearsighted old gentleman who had a cat named Hodge, and who counted all the cracks in the sidewalk when he went to town. "There now," he said. "You'll have a very unladylike scar on your wedding ring finger." "Thank you, sir." "Uncle Jack?" "Ma'am?" "What's a whore lady?" Uncle Jack plunged into another long tale about an old prime minister who sat in the House of Commons and blew feathers in the air and tried to keep them there, when all about him men were losing their heads. I guess he was trying to answer my question, but he made no sense whatsoever. Later, when I was supposed to be in bed, I went down the hall for a drink of water and heard Atticus and Uncle Jack in the living room. "I shall never marry, Atticus." "Why?" "I might have children." Atticus said, "You've a lot to learn, Jack." "I know. Your daughter gave me my first lessons this afternoon. She said I didn't understand children much, and told me why."
Wow.
She was quite right. Atticus, she told me how I should have treated her. Oh, dear. I'm so sorry I romped on her. Atticus chuckled. She earned it, so don't feel too remorseful. I waited on tenterhooks for Uncle Jack to tell Atticus my side of it, but he didn't. He simply murmured, "Her use of bathroom invective leaves nothing to the imagination, but she doesn't know the meaning of half she says." She asked me what a whore lady was. Did you tell her? No, I told her about Lord Melbourne. Jack, when a child asks you something, answer him, for goodness sake. But don't make a production of it. Children are children, but they can spot an evasion quicker than adults, and evasion simply muddles them. No, my father mused. You had the right answer this afternoon, but the wrong reasons. Bad language is a stage all children go through, and it dies with time when they learn they're not attracting attention with it. Hot-headedness isn't. Scout's got to learn to keep her head, and learn soon, with what's in store for her these next few months. She's coming along, though. Jem's getting older, and she follows his example a good bit now. All she needs is assistance sometimes. Atticus, you've never laid a hand on her. I admit that. So far, I've been able to get by with threats. Jack, she minds me as well as she can. Doesn't come up to scratch half the time, but she tries. That's not the answer, said Uncle Jack. No, the answer is she knows I know she tries. That's what makes the difference. What bothers me is that she and Jem will have to absorb some ugly things pretty soon. I'm not worried about Jem keeping his head, but Scout'd just as soon jump on someone as look at him, if her pride's at stake. I waited for Uncle Jack to break his promise. He still didn't. Atticus, how bad is this going to be? You haven't had too much chance to discuss it. It couldn't be worse, Jack. The only thing we've got is a black man's word against the Yules. The evidence boils down to you did, I didn't. The jury couldn't possibly be expected to take Tom Robinson's word against the Yules. Are you acquainted with the Yules? Uncle Jack said yes, he remembered them. He described them to Atticus, but Atticus said, "You're a generation off. The present ones are the same, though." What are you going to do, then? Before I'm through, I intend to jar the jury a bit. I think we'll have a reasonable chance on appeal, though. I really can't tell at this stage, Jack. You know, I'd hoped to get through life without a case of this kind, but John Taylor pointed at me and said, "You're it. Let this cup pass from you, eh?" Right. But do you think I could face my children otherwise? You know what's going to happen as well as I do, Jack. And I hope and pray I can get Jem and Scout through it without bitterness. And most of all, without catching Macomb's usual disease. Why reasonable people go stark raving mad when anything involving a Negro comes up is something I don't pretend to understand. I just hope that Jem and Scout come to me for their answers instead of listening to the town. I hope they trust me enough. Jean Louise? My scalp jumped. I stuck my head around the corner. Sir? Go to bed. I scurried to my room and went to bed. Uncle Jack was a prince of a fellow not to let me down, but I never figured out how Atticus knew I was listening. And it was not until many years later that I realized he wanted me to hear every word he said. Chapter 10. Atticus was feeble. He was nearly 50. When Jem and I asked him why he was so old, he said he got started late, which we felt reflected upon his abilities and manliness. He was much older.
Fools. Oh, babe's in the bathroom, so I'm going to have to hold it.
Than the parents of our school contemporaries, and there was nothing Jem or I could say about him when our classmates said, "My father." Jem was football crazy. Atticus was never too tired to play keep-away, but when Jem wanted to tackle him, Atticus would say, "I'm too old for that, son." Our father didn't do anything. He worked in an office, not in a drugstore. Atticus did not drive a dump truck for the county. He was not the sheriff. He did not farm, work in a garage, or do anything that could possibly arouse the admiration of anyone. Besides that, he wore glasses. He was nearly blind in his left eye, and said left eyes were the tribal curse of the Finches. Whenever he wanted to see something well, he turned his head and looked from his right eye. He did not do the things our schoolmates' fathers did. He never went hunting. He did not play poker, or fish, or drink, or smoke. He sat in the living room and read. With these attributes, however, he would not remain as inconspicuous as we wished him to. That year the school buzzed with talk about him defending Tom Robinson, none of which was complimentary. After my bout with Cecil Jacobs, when I committed myself to a policy of cowardice, word got around that Scout Finch wouldn't fight anymore. Her daddy wouldn't let her. This was not entirely correct. I wouldn't fight publicly for Atticus, but the family was private ground. I would fight anyone from a third cousin upwards, tooth and nail. Francis Hancock, for example, knew that. When he gave us our air rifles, Atticus wouldn't teach us to shoot. Uncle Jack instructed us in the rudiments thereof. He said Atticus wasn't interested in guns. Atticus said to Jem one day, "I'd rather you shot at tin cans in the backyard, but I know you'll go after birds. Shoot all the blue jays you want, if you can hit 'em. But remember, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird." That was the only time I ever heard Atticus say it was a sin to do something, and I asked Miss Morty about it. "Your father's right," she said. "Mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat up people's gardens, don't nest in corn cribs. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. That's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird." "Miss Morty, this is an old neighborhood, ain't it?" "Been here longer than the town." "No, I mean the folks on our street are all old. Jem and me's the only children around here. Mrs. Dubose is close on to 100, and Miss Rachel's old, and so are you and Atticus." "I don't call 50 very old," said Miss Morty tartly. "Not being wheeled around yet, am I? Neither's your father. But I must say Providence was kind enough to burn down that old mausoleum of mine. I'm too old to keep it up." "Maybe you're right, Jean Louise. This is a settled neighborhood. You've never been around young folks much, have you?" "Yes'm, at school." "I mean young grown-ups. You're lucky, you know. You and Jem have the benefit of your father's age. If your father was 30, you'd find life quite different." "I sure would. Atticus can't do anything." "You'd be surprised," said Miss Morty. "There's life in him yet." "What can he do?" "Well, he can make somebody's will so airtight can't anybody meddle with it. Shoot." "Well, did you know he's the best checker player in this town? Why, down at the landing, when we were coming up, Atticus Finch could beat everybody on both sides of the river." "Good Lord, Miss Morty, Jem and me beat him all the time." "It's about time you found out it's because he lets you. Did you know he can play a Jew's harp?" This modest accomplishment served to make me even more ashamed of him. "Well," she said. "Well, what, Miss Morty?" "Well, nothing. Nothing. It seems with all that you'd be proud of him. Can't everybody play a Jew's harp? Now keep out of the way of the carpenters. You'd better go home. I'll be in my azaleas and can't watch you. Plank might hit you." I went to the backyard and found Jem plugging away at a tin can, which seemed stupid with all the blue jays around. I returned to the front yard and busied myself for 2 hours erecting a complicated breastworks at the side of the porch, consisting of a tire, an orange crate, the laundry hamper, the porch chairs, and a small U.S. flag Jem gave me from a popcorn box. When Atticus came home to dinner, he found me crouched down aiming across the street. "What are you shooting at?" "Miss Morty's rear end." Atticus turned and saw my generous target bending over her bushes. He pushed his hat to the back of his head and crossed the street. "Morty," he called, "I thought I'd better warn you. You're in considerable peril." Miss Morty straightened up and looked toward me. She said, "Atticus, you are a devil from hell." When Atticus returned, he told me to break camp. "Don't you ever let me catch you pointing that gun at anybody again," he said. I wished my father was a devil from hell. I sounded out Calpurnia on the subject. Mr. Finch? Why, he can do lots of things. Like what? I asked. Calpurnia scratched her head. Well, I don't rightly know, she said. Jem underlined it when he asked Atticus if he was going out for the Methodists, and Atticus said he'd break his neck if he did. He was just too old for that sort of thing. The Methodists were trying to pay off their church mortgage and had challenged the Baptists to a game of touch football. Everybody in town's father was playing, it seemed, except Atticus. Jem said he didn't even want to go, but he was unable to resist football in any form, and he stood gloomily on the sidelines with Atticus and me, watching Cecil Jacobs' father make touchdowns for the Baptists. One Saturday, Jem and I decided to go exploring with our air rifles to see if we could find a rabbit or a squirrel. We had gone about 500 yards beyond the Radley place when I noticed Jem squinting at something down the street. He had turned his head to one side and was looking out of the corners of his eyes. "What you looking at?" "That old dog down yonder," he said. "That's old Tim Johnson, ain't it?" "Yeah." Tim Johnson was the property of Mr. Harry Johnson, who drove the Mobile bus and lived on the southern edge of town. Tim was a liver-colored bird dog, the pet of Macomb. "What's he doing?" "I don't know, Scout. We better go home." "Aw, Jem, it's February." "I don't care. I'm going to tell Cal." We raced home and ran to the kitchen. "Cal," said Jem, "can you come down the sidewalk a minute?" "What for, Jem? I can't come down the sidewalk every time you want me." "There's something wrong with an old dog down yonder." Calpurnia sighed. "I can't wrap up any dog's foot now. There's some gauze in the bathroom. Go get it and do it yourself." Jem shook his head. "He's sick, Cal. Something's wrong with him." "What's he doing? Trying to catch his tail?" "No, he's doing like this." Jem gulped like a goldfish, hunched his shoulders, and twitched his torso. "He's going like that, only not like he means to." "Are you telling me a story, Jem Finch?" Calpurnia's voice hardened. "No, Cal, I swear I'm not." "Was he running?" "No, he's just moseying along. So slow you can't hardly tell it. He's coming this way." Calpurnia rinsed her hands and followed Jem into the yard. "I don't see any dog," she said. She followed us beyond the Radley place and looked where Jem pointed. Tim Johnson was not much more than a speck in the distance, but he was closer to us. He walked erratically, as if his right legs were shorter than his left legs. He reminded me of a car stuck in a sand bed. "He's gone lopsided," said Jem. Calpurnia stared, then grabbed us by the shoulders and ran us home. She shut the wood door behind us, went to the telephone, and shouted, "Gimme Mr. Finch's office." "Mr. Finch," she shouted, "this is Cal. I swear to God there's a mad dog down the street apiece. He's coming this way. Yes, sir, he's... Mr. Finch, I declare he is. Old Tim Johnson, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes." She hung up and shook her head when we tried to ask her what Atticus had said. She rattled the telephone hook and said, "Miss Eula May? Now, ma'am, I'm through talking to Mr. Finch. Please don't connect me no more. Listen, Miss Eula May, can you call Miss Rachel and Miss Stephanie Crawford and whoever's got a phone on this street and tell 'em a mad dog's coming? Please, ma'am." Calpurnia listened. "I know it's February, Miss Eula May, but I know a mad dog when I see one. Please, ma'am, hurry." Calpurnia asked Jem, "Radley's got a phone?" Jem looked in the book and said no. "They won't come out anyway, Cal." "I don't care. I'm going to tell 'em." She ran to the front porch, Jem and I at her heels. "You stay in that house," she yelled. Calpurnia's message had been received by the neighborhood. Every wood door within our range of vision was closed tight. We saw no trace of Tim Johnson. We watched Calpurnia running toward the Radley place, holding her skirt and apron above her knees. She went up the front steps and banged on the door. She got no answer, and she shouted, "Mr. Nathan! Mr. Arthur! Mad Dog's coming! Mad Dog's coming!" "She's supposed to go around in back," I said. Jem shook his head. "Don't make any difference now," he said. Calpurnia pounded on the door in vain. No one acknowledged her warning. No one seemed to have heard it. As Calpurnia sprinted to the back porch, a black Ford swung into the driveway. Atticus and Mr. Heck Tate got out. Mr. Heck Tate was the sheriff of Macomb County. He was as tall as Atticus, but thinner. He was long-nosed, wore boots with shiny metal eye-holes, boot pants, and a lumber jacket. His belt had a row of bullets sticking in it. He carried a heavy rifle. When he and Atticus reached the porch, Jem opened the door. "Stay inside, son," said Atticus. "Where is he, Cal?" "He ought to be here by now," said Calpurnia, pointing down the street. "Not running, is he?" asked Mr. Tate. "No, sir. He's in the twitching stage, Mr. Heck." "Should we go after him, Heck?" asked Atticus. "We better wait, Mr. Finch. They usually go in a straight line, but you never can tell. He might follow the curve. Hope he does, or he'll go straight in the Radley backyard. Let's wait a minute." "Don't think he'll get in the Radley yard," said Atticus. "Fence'll stop him. He'll probably follow the road." I thought mad dogs foamed at the mouth, galloped, leaped, and lunged at throats, and I thought they did it in August. Had Tim Johnson behaved thus, I would have been less frightened. Nothing is more deadly than a deserted, waiting street. The trees were still, the mockingbirds were silent. The carpenters at Miss Maudie's house had vanished. I heard Mr. Tate sniff, then blow his nose. I saw him shift his gun to the crook of his arm. I saw Miss Stephanie Crawford's face framed in the glass window of her front door. Miss Maudie appeared and stood beside her. Atticus put his foot on the rung of a chair and rubbed his hand slowly down the side of his thigh. "There he is," he said softly.
He wants maple syrup.
Tim Johnson came into sight, walking dazedly in the inner rim of the curve parallel to the Radley house. "Look at him," whispered Jem. "Mr. Heck said they walked in a straight line. He can't even stay in the road." "He looks more sick than anything," I said. "Let anything get in front of him, and he'll come straight at it." Mr. Tate put his hand to his forehead and leaned forward. "He's got it all right, Mr. Finch." Tim Johnson was
Aww.
advancing at a snail's pace, but he was not playing or sniffing at foliage. He seemed dedicated to one course and motivated by an invisible force that was
knows my
inching
name!
toward us. We could see him shiver like a horse shedding flies. His jaw opened and shut. He was a list,
Okay.
but he was being pulled gradually toward us. "He's looking for a place to die," said Jem. Mr. Tate turned around. "He's far from dead, Jem. He hasn't got started yet." Tim Johnson reached the side street that ran in front of the Radley place, and what remained of his poor mind made him pause and seem to consider which road he would take. He made a few hesitant steps and stopped in front of the Radley gate. Then he tried to turn around, but was having difficulty. Atticus said, "He's within range, Heck. You better get him before he goes down the side street. Lord knows who's around the corner. Go inside, Cal." Calpurnia opened the screen door, latched it behind her, then unlatched it and held on to the hook. She tried to block Jem and me with her body, but we looked out from beneath her arms. "Take him, Mr. Finch. Mr. Tate handed the rifle to Atticus. Jem and I nearly fainted. "Don't waste time, Heck," said Atticus. "Go on. Mr. Finch, this is a one-shot job." Atticus shook his head vehemently. "Don't just stand there, Heck. He won't wait all day for you. For God's sake, Mr. Finch, look where he is. Miss, and you'll go straight into the Radley house. I can't shoot that well, and you know it. I haven't shot a gun in 30 years. Mr. Tate almost threw the rifle at Atticus. "I'd feel mighty comfortable if you did now," he said. In a fog, Jem and I watched our father take the gun and walk out into the middle of the street. He walked quickly, but I thought he moved like an underwater swimmer. Time had slowed to a nauseating crawl. When Atticus raised his glasses, Calpurnia murmured, "Sweet Jesus, help him," and put her hands to her cheeks. Atticus pushed his glasses to his forehead. They slipped down, and he dropped them in the street. In the silence, I heard them crack. Atticus rubbed his eyes and chin.
Damn, I'm just getting
saw him
clips
blink
all day,
hard.
aren't I?
In front of the Radley gate, Tim Johnson had made up what was left of his mind. He had finally turned himself around to pursue his original course up our street. He made 2 steps forward, then stopped and raised his head. We saw his body go rigid. With movements so swift they seemed simultaneous,
Why are you awake?
Atticus's hand yanked
Wait,
the
am I
ball-tipped
awake?
lever
Hold on,
as he brought
hold
the
on.
gun to his shoulder.
Hold on. I'm listening to To Kill a Mockingbird. And also, it's 8 p.m.
The backward Australian time.
What time is it for you, Noni?
It is 11 a.m. I have just woken up.
11 a.m. waking up in the morning, gotta get fresh, gotta go downstairs.
How are you doing, Seator?
I'm doing okay. I'm streaming.
On the channel?
Yeah, on the channel.
Oh my god, you... So you're doing it now in the secret chats?
Well, I only did it in the secret chat because no one was here. I'm like, oh, I'll just vibe. I'll just listen to Kill a Mockingbird.
So Seator, is it time? Is it time, Seator?
Is it time to what?
Is it time for your brain manipulation? Live on stream?
What do you mean, brain manipulation? What do you mean? What do you...
So Seator, are you like free this Saturday? Boo-boo?
This Saturday? Your Saturday?
Yes.
No, that's when I have D&D.
No. You don't have D&D. That's just something you made up in your mind, you know.
No, I have D&D. I have D&D. I have to play D&D. I'm sorry, but we've been on break, and I have a prisoner to interrogate, Noni. I have a prisoner to interrogate, and don't even try Friday, because that's when me and Jelly are going to 1, watch people play D&D, and 2, I'm also gonna play Lane on stream. So don't try me, Noni. I'm busy. I'm booked. I'm sorry. On the bright side, you completely missed Jelly losing all of his shit.
So, you know, I witnessed from the background, you know.
I mean, your character did, but like, did you actually like watch the recording?
No, Sean just told me because Jelly did not post a link yet.
Yeah, no, he lost his shit. I was nice, and I let him keep some of his shit. But he lost his shit. He lost his shit.
It used to be like wealth items, right?
No, the card states everything he owns, which should have been everything from like his weapons to the clothes off his back. But I'm like,
What did he pull? Did he pull Ruin?
yeah.
Ruin takes anything of wealth. Take all
Everything
the wealth.
is wealth.
That's it.
Everything is technically wealth. I mean, look, if you can sell it for any amount of money, it's worth something.
Okay.
And you can sell the clothes on his back and the weapons. They're not worth a lot. But, wait. This is not right.
What?
The mine changed. I'm in a different mine. God damn it. Wait, is that the prismatic jelly? Oh god, I'm gonna die. Okay. Okay.
You know, Jolly's now a poor person.
Oh, there we go. I got the prismatic jelly. Thank heck. Oh. Oh, God. I've been trying for that for ages. Jesus Christ. No, he's not a poor person. You know, he's like... He's like a guy now. He's lost all his things. His things are gone. He has no things. They're all missing. And by missing, I mean, taken. I have taken all his things. I'm sorry, Jelly. I'm not sorry. I took all your things.
He didn't have any magic items, right?
I'm pretty sure Ruin doesn't take magic. Oh, it actually might.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't specifically. It says there's no magic stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you have magic. I mean, now he has a magical item. He's a magical deck. He has the deck of many things.
I don't think he's gonna keep the deck of many things, you know.
I mean, it's a magic thing.
I think after that... I think, you know, after that traumatizing experience, he probably, you know, does not want to do that anymore.
Maybe, but don't you want to do that? Don't you want to
I'm assuming. I'm just assuming.
Yeah, I mean, technically your character saw him lose all his shit, so maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to look at it and suss it out. But, that happened. Oh, it's so good.
Bamsies will probably, you know, suss it out, you know, ook a little bit, and then, you know, just, like, pockets the deck away for safety.
Pocket the
You know,
deck away for
so
safety.
people will start fucking ooking.
Just pull cards from the deck. Just do it. I'll get rid of all the really bad ones.
See, so that's what they all say. This is
No, it's
every
not.
DM tells
No,
them.
it's not. No need for I am telling you right now. No, it is not. That is not what every DM says. That is not what every DM says at all.
They all want to see us suffer. They all want to see us suffer.
Yeah, that some of them would not like Babe literally said, yeah, I would have just taken everything he had off of him. Now, I talked to Jelly afterwards, and if I did roll and I took everything he had off of him, I wouldn't have, like, destroyed it. He would have been able to get it back, but still. It's like... I am comparatively a nice DM. I need to make sure you're aware of this.
Seatul says, nice DM, quotations. Oh, yeah, I believe you, Seatul. Next round... around the second two pulls the void.
Listen.
Instantly.
No. I wouldn't do that.
Also, yeah, once cannot even pull the void. I don't think it will work on her.
What's the void do again?
That was funny.
Remind me.
It takes your soul and seals it in the void plane or whatever it's called in D&D. But like Krems does not own her soul specifically, so you know.
I mean, how do you know that Ramses doesn't own her soul?
Because she has a weird mark, and she is slightly insane. She has voices. She has voices in her head.
Listen, no, that's completely normal because they're living in your walls, living in your walls, living in your walls, living in your walls, living in your walls. Okay? When people live in your walls, it's normal. It's okay, Noni. You're okay.
No, it's normal. No. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna plot. deck. And I'm also not gonna roll the dice. I'm not gonna fall for any of your petty tricks, Cecil.
What
None
are you
of them.
talking
mean, none
about?
of-
Tricks? I'd never trick you, Noni. Tricks are for kids.
No. No. Guys, give me like a day and I'll just figure out what this stuff do. And you'd be like, no. You know, it's real fun to try them out, right, guys?
I want you to try them. I want you to try them out. I think it'll be fun. I mean, one of you just got happy jumpy boots that makes you double jump, you know? Isn't that fun?
And one of us... This Cronus, it seems he still has his clothes.
Yes, I let him keep his clothes. He lost his armor, but now he has, Birdman's armor, so you know.
I'm hyped to find out what the fucking plank of wood does.
Oh yeah, I described it incorrectly according to the book, but you know what? It could be a plank of wood. No one can tell me. The plank of wood I thought would be a useful item for you guys. I tried to pick items that I thought you guys would actually get some use out of, you know? As well as things I thought looked cool.
Plank of wood.
Yeah, the plank of wood.
Plank of wood. Cosmic dice.
You wanted the cosmic dice!
dice.
You wanted them! You were asking me for... You wanted the dice! I gave you the dice! Don't ask like you weren't being like Cito.
Yes, I'm not... Cito, I think it's like 80 years to get the cosmic dice. Fine, I'll just put them there.
Yeah,
I did not know you put them there. I was surprised when I found them.
Yeah, I gave you a dice. You can earn all the dice. Now you have one die. Now you need to find the other 7. It's cool. Your character does nothing but go on fetch quests. It's great.
Smash cut 5 years from now in the middle of the fucking universe searching for the last die.
I mean, the die on its own does stuff. It's just the more die you have, the higher number you can roll. The more stuff you can do. That's cool.
And I assume the Twamsies cannot identify the die.
I mean, it's not like a common magical item, so I don't think it's the kind of thing where you'd already have pre-existing knowledge of it.
No, obviously.
Yeah.
But would a level 1 or 2 spells work on such a quirky, weird item?
Such a
I
custom
don't think
item.
it will.
Yeah, this is one of
and
the...
especially-
I mean, it's also like technically it's incomplete because it's like it's one. It's a octet out of the fluorite octets. There's 8 of them. Is it really complete unless you have all 8?
I don't know.
Oh.
At first I just asked God what the fuck is this.
Why would your god know?
What do you mean God? No, I mean the Wikipedia God. The divine intervention, whatever. I assume they're probably gonna have some knowledge about it. Or like, you know, ask around. Whatever Wikipedia God does, aka you.
I'm a fish.
You're a fish.
I'm a fish.
Oh. You're a fish.
I am a fish.
You are a fish.
Yeah. That's what I am. I'm a fish.
But you know, a big magic fish, I assume.
I am all of those things. I'm all those things.
I pay tribute. I got your fucking book. Where was this fucking answer some question?
Yeah.
I hope it does not work similar the way it does other places. Because if it's like, oh, if you want the best effect of the die, I have to like complete them 6 years from now, obviously, when I'm like old and decrepit. I hope it's not like I have to roll a fucking 8d8 and have them actually all land.
If you have 8d8 and they will get 8s, you get like the ultimate weapon.
Which is just, a slightly, shinier thing that I could flick stuff with.
You get like you get like you roll all 8d8s. The dice gives you a full deck of many things.
Lamau. You roll 1d8, you become a monster.
No, you get like a funny hat. You roll 1d8, you get like a funny hat.
No, I said you roll 8d8. Graham is the second, assumes her real form, her real form.
Her real form, a wink,
Fucking materials is an AK-47.
Shows up in a Nazi uniform. She's just, she's just lezzing it out,
And for like a couple of seconds, she's just swinging stuff around, jumping out like a fucking ninja.
Oh man, I need money to go to the desert. Oh, it reminds me, I can
Then
craft.
stop being poor.
I hate you. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. Don't say one quick thing twice. I might go fishing
You're
now.
playing another session with Jelly?
No, I'm not playing. Where I'm going to watch people play D&D. We're gonna watch people play D&D.
One of those quirky podcasts?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch one of those quirky podcasts together. Yeah, me and Jelly are gonna watch a little quirky podcast.
In your secret quirky podcast watching channel?
No, we'll just watch it in a normal channel probably. I'll stream it to him.
So this stuff.
So Disney. We're gonna be watching season 3 of Critical Role. Let me buy a chicken. I need a heater. Excellent. Now, purchase animals. Hold on. Escape. It's a new white chicken. Hold on. Yes! Blue chicken! What should I name my blue chicken?
Pringles.
Pringles, huh?
Yes.
Well,
Send a Pringles can.
at least you didn't suggest I name my blue chicken waffle. Oh god, Shane, I love you so much. You're so depressed. He's so depressed. No Need Bread's so hot. He's old and he's so old and miserable. No Need Bread, you don't
You're
understand.
doing the fucking meme.
What
You're doing the
meme?
meme.
What meme? No Need Bread, I mean this with my heart, with my soul.
Still, there's quote unquote ironic images of like, a Reddit user types something, and then suddenly like a girl bursts to the fucking door and says, "God, you're so fucking hot." You typed in Keck and Lamau. This is what you do in Cito, but in real life.
Yeah, but I mean it. This isn't
Exactly.
this isn't like some Redditor's fantasy. I literally see Shane and I'm like, yes, that's what I want. That man is what I want. This isn't a bit. I'm not playing. I seriously want Shane. He's great. He's perfect. He's everything I wanted. I'm holding myself back from jumping on him so I can get closer to other characters without feeling like shit.
Cito,
Yes.
so you just made the fantasy a reality, Cito. You just did. You just did.
Listen.
You confirmed that people are attracted to those traits.
Listen.
I'm shaking my fucking head.
Look, Shane is also fictional, okay?
Ah, there we go. There we go. The cope excuse.
Look, can some fucking neckbeard redditor give me a blue chicken? Can he do that? Can he overcome his depression? Can I find him in his most vulnerable moments, laying on the ground, contemplating suicide while shit-faced drunk? Can I help him become a better version of himself?
Oh my fucking god.
The answer is no! You can't help a redditor! They're too fucked!
I can fix him!
No, you can't! No, you can't! You can't fix a redditor! You can, however, fix a fictional man! Because he's not real! He's not real! That's the plot line! Shane isn't real, that's why I can fix him, that's why it's possible. If he was a real man, it'd be impossible.
Are you saying it's impossible to fix them in real life?
Yes! They're too fucked! Gentlemen, no woman will make you feel whole, I'm sorry. You are not.
You're not sorry, Cecil.
Listen. Shane has a dad bod and is kind of grungy but in a hot way. You are a literal neckbeard who doesn't shower. You are not the same.
You are not the same.
You are not the same. In being a pixel 2D character, Shane does not smell. He does not emit a scent. And therefore, he is superior to real men in every way.
Insane person. You're an insane person, Cecil.
Well, yeah, no need. I want to fuck, like, fictional bugs. Not real bugs, fictional bugs that are humanoid. Mussy, no need, bruh. Like, are you only just now figuring out I'm insane?
No comment. No comment.
No comment, he says.
I'm gonna go now, so I can go walk in the sun.
In the
Possibly
sun?
touch grass.
Yeah, you might need it. You might need it after spending some time with me.
Oh, touch grass, touch grass, touch grass!
Yeah, go touch
Goodbye,
grass.
people.
Goodbye, Nanny
Goodbye.
Brent. Enjoy your grass.
I shall.
There goes Nanny Brent. He's a good man. Red mullet. It started out with a kid, started and
The rifle cracked. Tim Johnson leaped, flopped over, and crumpled on the sidewalk in a brown and white heap. He didn't know what hit him. Mr. Tate jumped off the porch and ran to the Radley place. He stopped in front of the dog, squatted, turned around, and tapped his finger on his forehead above his left eye. "You were a little to the right, Mr. Finch," he called. "Always was," answered Atticus. "If I had my druthers, I'd take a shotgun." He stooped and picked up his glasses, ground the broken lenses to powder under his heel, and went to Mr. Tate and stood looking down at Tim Johnson. Doors opened one by one, and the neighborhood slowly came alive. Miss Morty walked down the steps with Miss Stephanie Crawford. Jem was paralyzed. I pinched him to get him moving, but when Atticus saw us coming, he said, "Stay where you are." When Mr. Tate and Atticus returned to the yard, Mr. Tate was smiling. "I'll have Zebo collect him," he said. "You haven't forgot much, Mr. Finch. They say it never leaves you." Atticus was silent. "Atticus?" said Jem. "Yes?" "Nothing." "I saw that one-shot Finch." Atticus wheeled around and faced Miss Morty. They looked at one another without saying anything, and Atticus got into the sheriff's car. "Come here," he said to Jem. "Don't you go near that dog, you understand? Don't go near him. He's just as dangerous dead as alive." "Yes, sir," said Jem. "Atticus?" "What, son?" "Nothing." "What's the matter with you, boy? Can't you talk?" said Mr. Tate, grinning at Jem. "Didn't you know your daddy's—" "Hush, Heck," said Atticus. "Let's go back to town." When they drove away, Jem and I went to Miss Stephanie's front steps. We sat waiting for Zebo to arrive in the garbage truck. Jem sat in numb confusion, and Miss Stephanie said, who'd have thought of a mad dog in February? Maybe he wasn't mad. Maybe he was just crazy. I'd hate to see Harry Johnson's face when he gets in from the Mobile Run and finds Atticus Finch has shot his dog. Bet he was just full of fleas from somewhere. Miss Morty said Miss Stephanie'd be singing a different tune if Tim Johnson was still coming up the street. That they'd find out soon enough. They'd send his head to Montgomery. Jem became vaguely articulate. "Did you see him, Scout? Did you see him just standing there? And all of a sudden, he just relaxed all over, and it looked like that gun was a part of him. And he did it so quick, like, I have to aim for 10 minutes before I can hit something." Miss Morty grinned wickedly. "Well now, Miss Jean Louise," she said, "still think your father can't do anything? Still ashamed of him?" "No," I said meekly. "Forgot to tell you the other day that besides playing the Jew's harp, Atticus Finch was the deadest shot in Macomb County in his time." "Dead shot," echoed Jem. "That's what I said, Jem Finch. Guess you'll change your tune now. The very idea. Didn't you know his nickname was Old One-Shot when he was a boy? Why, down at the landing, when he was coming up, if he shot 15 times and hit 14 doves, he'd complain about wasting ammunition." "He never said anything about that," Jem muttered. "Never said anything about it, did he?" "No, ma'am." "Wonder why he never goes hunting now," I said. "Maybe I can tell you," said Miss Morty. "If your father's anything, he's civilized in his heart. Marksmanship's a gift of God, a talent. Oh, you have to practice to make it perfect. But shooting's different from playing the piano or the like. I think maybe he put his gun down when he realized that God had given him an unfair advantage over most living things. I guess he decided he wouldn't shoot till he had to. And he had to today." "Looks like he'd be proud of it," I said. "People in their right minds never take pride in their talents," said Miss Morty. We saw Zebo drive up. He took a pitchfork from the back of the garbage truck and gingerly lifted Tim Johnson. He pitched the dog onto the truck, then poured something from a gallon jug on and around the spot where Tim fell. "Don't y'all come over here for a while," he called. When we went home, I told Jem we'd really have something to talk about at school on Monday. Jem turned on me. "Don't say anything about it, Scout," he said. "What? I certainly am. Ain't everybody's daddy the deadest shot in Macomb County?" Jem said, "I reckon if he'd wanted us to know it, he'd have told us. If he was proud of it, he'd have told us." "Maybe it just slipped his mind," I said. "No, Scout. It's something you wouldn't understand. Atticus is real old, but I wouldn't care if he couldn't do anything. I wouldn't care if he couldn't do a blessed thing." Jem picked up a rock and threw it jubilantly at the car house. Running after it, he called back, "Atticus is a gentleman, just like me." Chapter 11. When we were small, Jem and I confined our activities to the southern neighborhood. But when I was well into the 2nd grade at school, and tormenting Boo Radley became passé, the business section of Macomb drew us frequently up the street past the real property of Mrs. Henry Lafayette DuBose. It was impossible to go to town without passing her house, unless we wished to walk a mile out of the way. Previous minor encounters with her left me with no desire for more, but Jem said I had to grow up sometime. Mrs. DuBose lived alone except for a Negro girl in constant attendance, 2 doors up the street from us, in a house with steep front steps and a dog-trot hall. She was very old. She spent most of each day in bed, and the rest of it in a wheelchair. It was rumored that she kept a CSA pistol concealed among her numerous shawls and wraps. Jem and I hated her. If she was on the porch when we passed, we would be raked by her wrathful gaze, subjected to ruthless interrogation regarding our behavior, and given a melancholy prediction on what we would amount to when we grew up, which was always nothing. We had long ago given up the idea of walking past her house on the opposite side of the street. That only made her raise her voice and let the whole neighborhood in on it. We could do nothing to please her. If I said as sunnily as I could, "Hey, Mrs. DuBose," I would receive for an answer, "Don't you say hey to me, you ugly girl. You say good afternoon, Mrs. DuBose." She was vicious. Once she heard Jem refer to our father as Atticus, and her reaction was apoplectic. Besides being the sassiest, most disrespectful mutts who ever passed her way, we were told that it was quite a pity our father had not remarried after our mother's death. A lovelier lady than our mother never lived, she said, and it was heartbreaking the way Atticus Finch let her children run wild. I did not remember our mother, but Jem did. He would tell me about her sometimes, and he went livid when Mrs. DuBose shot us this message. Jem, having survived Boo Radley, a mad dog, and other terrors, had concluded that it was cowardly to stop at Miss Rachel's front steps and wait, and had decreed that we must run as far as the post office corner each evening to meet Atticus coming from work. Countless evenings, Atticus would find Jem furious at something Mrs. DuBose had said when we went by. "Easy does it, son," Atticus would say. "She's an old lady and she's ill. You just hold your head high and be a gentleman. Whatever she says to you, it's your job not to let her make you mad." Jem would say she must not be very sick. She hollered so. When the 3 of us came to her house, Atticus would sweep off his hat, wave gallantly to her, and say, "Good evening, Mrs. DuBose. You look like a picture this evening." I never heard Atticus say like a picture of what. He would tell her the courthouse news, and would say he hoped with all his heart she'd have a good day tomorrow. He would return his hat to his head, swing me to his shoulders in her very presence, and we would go home in the twilight. It was times like these when I thought my father, who hated guns and had never been to any wars, was the bravest man who ever lived. The day after Jem's 12th birthday, his money was burning up his pockets, so we headed for town in the early afternoon. Jem thought he had enough to buy a miniature steam engine for himself and a twirling baton for me. I had long had my eye on that baton. It was at V.J. Elmore's. It was bedecked with sequins and tinsel. It cost 17 cents. It was then my burning ambition to grow up and twirl with the Macomb County High School band. Having developed my talent to where I could throw up a stick and almost catch it coming down, I had caused Calpurnia to deny me entrance to the house every time she saw me with a stick in my hand. I felt that I could overcome this defect with a real baton, and I thought it was generous of Jem to buy one for me. Mrs. DuBose was stationed on her porch when we went by. "Where are you 2 going at this time of day?" she shouted. "Playing hooky, I suppose. I'll just call up the principal and tell him." She put her hands on the wheels of her chair and executed a perfect right face. "Oh, it's Saturday, Mrs. DuBose," said Jem. "Makes no difference if it's Saturday," she said obscurely. "I wonder if your father knows where you are." "Mrs. DuBose, we've been going to town by ourselves since we were this high." Jem placed his hand, palm down, about 2 feet above the sidewalk. "Don't you lie to me," she yelled. "Jeremy Finch, Maudie Atkinson told me you broke down her scuppernong arbor this morning. She's going to tell your father, and then you'll wish you never saw the light of day. If you aren't sent to the reform school before next week, my name's not DuBose." Jem, who hadn't been near Miss Maudie's scuppernong arbor since last summer, and who knew Miss Maudie wouldn't tell Atticus if he had, issued a general denial. "Don't you contradict me," Mrs. DuBose bawled. "And you," she pointed an arthritic finger at me. "What are you doing in those overalls? You should be in a dress and camisole, young lady. You'll grow up waiting on tables if somebody doesn't change your ways. A Finch waiting on tables at the OK Cafe. Ha!" I was terrified. The OK Cafe was a dim organization on the north side of the square. I grabbed Jem's hand, but he shook me loose. "Come on, Scout," he whispered. "Don't pay any attention to her. Just hold your head high and be a
Oh, a
gentleman."
duck feather!
But Mrs. DuBose held us. "Not only a Finch waiting on tables, but one in the courthouse lawing for niggers." Jem stiffened. Mrs. DuBose's shot had gone home, and she knew it. "Yes, indeed. What has this world come to when a Finch goes against his raising? I'll tell you."
Cat.
She put her hand to her mouth.
Cat.
When she drew it away, it trailed a long silver thread of saliva. "Your father's no better than the niggers and trash he works for." Jem was scarlet. I pulled at his sleeve, and we were followed up the sidewalk by a philippic on our family's moral degeneration, the major premise of which was that half the Finches were in the asylum anyway. But if our mother were living, we would not have come to such a state. I wasn't sure what Jem resented most, but I took umbrage at Mrs. DuBose's assessment of the family's mental hygiene. I had become almost accustomed to hearing insults aimed at Atticus, but this was the first one coming from an adult. Except for her remarks about Atticus, Mrs. DuBose's attack was only routine. There was a hint of summer in the air. In the shadows it was cool, but the sun was warm, which meant good times coming. No
Sun.
school and dill. Jem bought his steam engine, and we went by Elmore's for my baton. Jem took no pleasure in his acquisition. He jammed it in his pocket and walked silently beside me toward home. On the way home, I nearly hit Mr. Link Diaz, who said, "Look out now, Scout," when I missed a toss. And when we approached Mrs. DuBose's house, my baton was grimy from having picked it up out of the dirt so many times. She was not on the porch. In later years, I sometimes wondered exactly what made Jem do it. What made him break the bonds of, "You just be a gentleman, son," and the phase of self-conscious rectitude he had recently entered. Jem had probably stood as much guff about Atticus lawing for niggers as had I, and I took it for granted that he kept his temper. He had a
Oh,
naturally
son.
tranquil disposition and a slow fuse.
Oh, my son. My cat
At the
son's
time,
name.
however, I thought the only explanation for what he did was that for a few minutes he simply went mad. What Jem did was something I'd do as a matter of course, had I not been under Atticus's interdict, which I assumed included not fighting horrible old ladies. We had just come to her gate when Jem snatched my baton and ran flailing wildly up the steps into Mrs. DuBose's front yard, forgetting everything Atticus had said, forgetting that she packed a pistol under her shawls, forgetting that if Miss DuBose missed, her girl Jessie probably wouldn't. He did not begin to calm down until he had cut the tops off every camellia bush Mrs. DuBose owned,
Oh.
until the ground was littered with green buds and leaves. He bent my baton against his knee, snapped it in two, and threw it down. By that time I was shrieking.
My cat son's here. He desires a pet. He desires a smooch. Anyway. It does. Oh, the piggy's here! Hello, piggy. Frozen dreams. Yes. Sam, how do you not know how to fish? Sebastian, what the heck? Oh, my love, Shane. Yes, Shane, you would. You fucking piece of obsessed nerd. I love you. Let me in here. Aww. Aww. How cute. Aww. Fair. Oh, it's cute. I like him. No, Clint, you're a baby. Yeah, you can plan on that. That's fair, Haley. Playing in the snow can be fun. Yes, Demetrius, you should have. Yes, I'll do my best. Gus is just like, sorry, there's no food. Hello. There. Actually, maybe a little more of the book.
Jem yanked my hair, said he didn't care. He'd do it again if he got a chance. And if I didn't shut up, he'd pull every hair out of my head. I didn't shut up, and he kicked me. I lost my balance and fell on my face. Jem picked me up roughly, but looked like he was sorry. There was nothing to say. We did not choose to meet Atticus coming home that evening. We skulked around the kitchen until Calpurnia threw us out. By some voodoo system, Calpurnia seemed to know all about it. She was a less than satisfactory source of palliation, but she did give Jem a hot biscuit and butter, which he tore in half and shared with me. It tasted like cotton. We went to the living room. I picked up a football magazine, found a picture of Dixie Howell, showed it to Jem and said, "This looks like you." That was the nicest thing I could think to say to him, but it was no help. He sat by the windows, hunched down in a rocking chair, scowling, waiting. Daylight faded. 2 geological ages later, we heard the soles of Atticus's shoes scrape the front steps. The screen door slammed. There was a pause. Atticus was at the hat rack in the hall, and we heard him call, "Jem!" His voice was like the winter wind. Atticus switched on the ceiling light in the living room and found us there, frozen still. He carried my baton in one hand. Its filthy yellow tassel trailed on the rug. He held out his other hand. It contained fat camellia buds. Jem, he said, are you responsible for this? Yes, sir. Why'd you do it? Jem said softly, she said you lawed for niggers and trash. You did this because she said that? Jem's lips moved, but his yes, sir, was inaudible. Son, I have no doubt that you've been annoyed by your contemporaries about me lawing for niggers, as you say. But to do something like this to a sick old lady is inexcusable. I strongly advise you to go down and have a talk with Mrs. Dubose, said Atticus. Come straight home afterward. Jem did not move. Go on, I said. I followed Jem out of the living room. Come back here, Atticus said to me. I came back. Atticus picked up the Mobile press and sat down in the rocking chair Jem had vacated. For the life of me, I did not understand how he could sit there in cold blood and read a newspaper when his only son stood an excellent chance of being murdered with a Confederate Army relic. Of course, Jem antagonized me sometimes until I could kill him, but when it came down to it, he was all I had. Atticus did not seem to realize this, or if he did, he didn't care. I hated him for that. But when you are in trouble, you become easily tired. Soon I was hiding in his lap, and his arms were around me. You're mighty big to be rocked, he said. You don't care what happens to him, I said. You just send him on to get shot at, when all he was doing was standing up for you. Atticus pushed my head under his chin. It's not time to worry yet, he said. I never thought Jem'd be the one to lose his head over this. Thought I'd have more trouble with you. I said I didn't see why we had to keep our heads anyway, that nobody I knew at school had to keep his head about anything. Scout, said Atticus, when summer comes, you'll have to keep your head about far worse things. It's not fair for you and Jem, I know that. But sometimes we have to make the best of things. And the way we conduct ourselves when the chips are down, well, all I can say is, when you and Jem are grown, maybe you'll look back on this with some compassion and some feeling that I didn't let you down. This case, Tom Robinson's case, is something that goes to the essence of a man's conscience. Scout, I couldn't go to church and worship God if I didn't try to help that man. Atticus, you must be wrong. How's that? Well, most folks seem to think they're right and you're wrong. They're certainly entitled to think that, and they're entitled to full respect for their opinions, said Atticus. But before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. When Jem returned, he found me still in Atticus's lap. Well, son, said Atticus. He set me on my feet, and I made a secret reconnaissance of Jem. He seemed to be all in one piece, but he had a queer look on his face. Perhaps she had given him a dose of calomel. I cleaned it up for her and said I was sorry, but...
Well, I think that's all for tonight, but mostly because I need to shower and get ready for tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow. I might keep chilling. Check the description. Give money to Kai. Kai needs it. Give him your money. Give it. Goodbye.